The Russian Revolution was a pair of revolutions in Russia in 1917, which dismantled the Tsarist autocracy and led to the eventual rise of the Soviet Union. The Russian Empire collapsed with the abdication of Emperor Nicholas II, and the old regime was replaced by a provisional government during the First Revolution of February 1917, which was March in the Gregorian calendar. In the Second Revolution that October, the provisional government was removed and replaced with a communist state. The February Revolution in March 1917 was a revolution focused around Petrograd, now St. Petersburg and then capital of Russia. In the chaos, members of the Imperial Parliament, or Duma, assumed control of the country, forming the Russian Provisional Government. The army leadership felt that they did not have the means to suppress the revolution, resulting in Nicholas's abdication. The Soviet Workers' Councils, which were led by more radical socialist factions, initially permitted the provisional government to rule, but insisted on a prerogative to influence the government and control various militias. The February Revolution took place in the context of heavy military setbacks during the First World War, which left much of the Russian army in a state of mutiny. A period of dual power ensued, during which the provisional government held state power, while the national network of Soviets, led by the socialists, had the allegiance of the lower classes and the political left. During this chaotic period, there were frequent mutinies, protests, and many strikes. When the provisional government chose to continue fighting the war with Germany, the Bolsheviks and other socialist factions campaigned for stopping the conflict. The Bolsheviks turned workers' militias under their control into the Red Guards, later the Red Army, over which they exerted substantial control. In the October Revolution, November in the Gregorian calendar, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, and the Workers' Soviets overthrew the provisional government in Petrograd and established the Russian SFSR, eventually shifting the capital to Moscow in 1918. The Bolsheviks appointed themselves as leaders of various governmental industries and seized control of the countryside, establishing the Cheka to quash dissent. To end Russia's participation in the First World War, the Bolshevik leaders signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in 1918. Soon after, civil war erupted amongst the Reds, Bolsheviks, the Whites, counter-revolutionaries, independence movements, and other non-Bolshevik socialists. It continued for several years, during which the Bolsheviks defeated both the Whites and all rival socialists. In this way, the revolution paved the way for the creation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, in 1922. While many notable historical events occurred in Moscow and Petrograd, there was also visible movement in cities throughout the state, among national minorities throughout the empire, and in the rural areas where peasants took over and redistributed land. The social causes of the Russian Revolution mainly came from centuries of oppression of the lower classes by the Tsarist regime and Nicholas's failures in World War I. While rural Hungarian peasants had been emancipated from serfdom in 1861, they still resented paying redemption payments to the state and demanded communal tender of the land that they worked. The problem was further compounded by the failure of Sergei Wheat's land reforms of the early 20th century. Increasing peasant disturbances and sometimes actual revolts had occurred, with the goal of securing ownership of the land that they worked. Russia consisted mainly of poor farming peasants, with 1.5% of the population owning 25% of the land. The rapid industrialization of Russia also resulted in urban overcrowding and poor conditions for urban industrial workers. Between 1890 and 1910, the population of the capital, St. Petersburg, swelled from 1 million to 1.9 million, with Moscow experiencing similar growth. This created a new proletariat, which, due to being crowded together in the cities, was much more likely to protest and go on strike than the peasantry that had been there in previous times. In one 1904 survey, it was found that an average of 16 people shared each apartment in St. Petersburg, with 6 people per room. There was also no running water, and piles of human waste were a threat to the health of the workers. The poor conditions only aggravated the situation, with the number of strikes and incidents of public disorder rapidly increasing in the years shortly before World War I. Because of late industrialization, Russia's workers were highly concentrated, and by 1914, 40% of Russia's workers were employed in factories of 1,000 plus workers, 32% in 1901. 42% worked in 100 to 1,000 workers' enterprises, and 18% into 1 to 100 workers' businesses. A look at the national annual strikes from the time period shows that the revolution was indeed a building storm, as from 1862 to the early 70s, only 6 annual strikes were recorded, going up to 20 in the 70s, 30 in the 80s, and 176 in the early 1900s. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I promise I'm not this dull and boring in real life. Goodbye.